Hi everybody, and thanks for joining me today. I am continuing to finish up the fence. I'm getting closer to the flower, although I probably won't be there for another week. I am not starting at 0 today. I had some issues. I got a huge snarl and was having trouble figuring out what went where, so I decided to just start over again. So 45 is what's been done, and I'm going to continue on from there. Oh dear. So I apologize if I run out of things to talk about because I can't remember what I was babbling about earlier. Oh, try not to repeat myself from the time before, but who knows. I swear, I think I jinxed myself because I thought to myself, oh, I shouldn't have any tech issues today. I've checked everything. So, of course, what happens? Yeah. Oh, it's the way. Oh, you're not going to do that, are you? Please don't. Oh, my gosh. All right, can we not do that? That would be great. See if I need to reboot this pattern keeper or not. Sometimes it starts to act up. You have to restart it, but we'll see if it will behave. Yeah, I had to pull down the top from the top menu to stop the recording and start again, and sometimes that confuses it, and then every time I touch anywhere near the top of the screen, it keeps trying to pull that menu down even when I'm not pulling it downwards, and it gets rather annoying. We're having another warmer one today. We will see. So far in the forecast, it doesn't look like we're going to get any major cold snaps, but I often say those usually come February, so we will see. I have to go out to run some errands today. I usually do most of my shopping on Sunday, but there's one place that isn't open on Sunday, so I have to go. There's a local place in town. I want to buy some pre-made burgers because they make a nice quick meal on one of the days I'm working. I have one of those little panini press grills, indoor grills, and so they work great to make burgers. I think I got that one with my air miles. I don't get as many air miles now. A lot of places have sort of opted out of doing them. Safeway, Staples, I think Rona, most of them have quit doing it. My one of my credit cards still earns air miles, but it's not very much. I said, yeah, because what you might call it, Safeway, they changed over, and they now are on Scene Plus, which is done by the Cineplex. And I said it's kind of a ripoff for me because I used to earn, say, 3 to 5 air miles a week with the shopping I did at Safeway, and it added up. But now I said it takes me a whole year to earn $10 worth off groceries, because my husband was with me once when I used them. They said, oh, do you want to use points? And I said, sure. And my husband said, oh, nice, $10 off. I said, yeah, but you know how long it took me to earn that? I do most of my points is from the Great Canadian Superstore, because I think I earned almost $900 worth of points last year. It is obviously a lot better than $10. That's how I paid for my stand mixer and soda stream machine. A couple of them, because they don't last very long. I think we're on our third one, and we don't use it that much, but they don't build things to last like they used to, I have to say. Oops. Although I have been happy with my Shark vacuum, because before that, I felt every vacuum I had only lasted a couple of years. My first one I bought when, Well, the very first one I bought when I left my parents' house was a Dirt Devil. It didn't last very long. Then I bought a Hoover, and it was great. I used that for almost 10 years, but then after that, I had an Electrolux, I had another Hoover, and neither of them lasted very long. Then I finally went to the Shark, which is made by Dyson. That one's been good. I've been using that for the last like 8 or 9 years, I think. So I think I will buy them again when this one that I currently have finally dies. Talking of points, I've been saving up my Canadian Tire points for that. Oh, pardon me. Canadian Tire used to actually do money, which was like printed Canadian Tire money. And then they switched to just points. But I think it was too easy for people to counterfeit it. But it was like 5 cents, 25 cents. So if you wanted to buy something Canadian Tire money, it was quite a lot. There was actually a joke play we went to that was based on like Orange is the New Black, but it was like a Canadian version. And so in it, the story was that the warden had the inmates counterfeiting Canadian Tire money. And so it shows he hands out these two huge bulging duffel bags, and the guy gives him the equivalent in actual cash, and it's like this tiny little folded bit of notes, because yeah, $100 worth of Canadian Tire money was like a huge amount of paper. There was one guy who actually, I think it was before they switched over to the points, but there was a guy who saved up to buy something entirely with Canadian Tire money, and it was a canoe. So he said that was quite a Canadian purchase. Yeah, it's called Canadian Tire because that's how they started, was just a tire shop. But now I think tires is probably only a small portion of their business. They carry so much more stuff. Tools and camping supplies and like backyard patio furniture, that kind of thing. They even carry toys, and they got vacuums, and I got my steam mop from there. It drove one of my friends nuts because her dad always called it Canadian Tires, and she's like, there's no S, it's just called Canadian Tire. That was a funny meme I saw saying, if you just add an S to the end of things when talking to a younger person, it's like an instant rage spell. Oh, you're playing with the Pokemon? Or yeah, you're playing Pokemons? You're doing Minecrafts? Or they said, or add the. Are you on the Facebook? It's not the, Grandpa. I remember there was a movie I watched. I can't remember what it's called. It was Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson. They were interns working at Google or something. And they were, of course, the oldest interns because everybody else was like early 20s, and they were guys in their 40s or something. And their boss kind of comes up with, okay, we want you to come up with some new product. And so he basically comes up with the idea for Instagram, right? As he's saying, what if you had a thing where like you could take pictures and then like instantly put them on the line? They're like, it's not called on the line, it's just online. And he keeps calling it that and driving them all nuts. Oh. And then they keep trying to tell him, like, dude, no, that already exists. It's called Instagram. Oh. I don't really remember very much about that movie, but I remember that scene quite vividly. On the line. So I think of that every now and then and laugh. This section here I'm working is kind of in between. There's another bit of brass here and then another coming down sort of here. So I'm kind of working both at the same time, the inside and the brass, and then it turns into the flower petal there. but I'm going to kind of stay doing just the knot flower part. And then I will probably move the whole frame over and do the flowery part then. Yeah, language is so weird. My son, he really loves looking at the whole mistranslated stuff. He thinks it's hilarious. So they have, and it's funny because I said sometimes you can figure out what it was they were going for in the translation and it just got lost in translation. But sometimes it doesn't make any sense at all. So there was a menu and it had like, the chef is a problem. I'm like, is that supposed to be like chef surprise or something? And then there was, but some of them it was funny because they had chicken rude and unreasonable. And I'm like, I'm guessing they meant jerk chicken because jerk is a spice, but of course it also translates as somebody rude and unreasonable. So there was one that says cow something, not even beef something, cow something. There was one that said shredded butt meat. I'm like, I'm guessing they meant rump roast. It's funny how one little word can make such a difference. There was one in Japan and it was like for a dry cleaners. And the sign says, drop your pants here and receive prompt attention. It's like, yeah, well, no kidding. Drop off your pants here. And it's funny how one little word like that can make such a difference in meaning. One is appropriate, one is not. Oh, I wonder if they're plowing out there. Or if that's a train. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. There is one kind of hiding down there. I'm just going to start a thread for it. Yeah, sometimes the plow blade scraping can make that kind of a musical note almost, so I'm not really sure what's going on. Although I would be surprised if they're plowing right now. We haven't had a lot of snow. And usually when they decide to plow, it's actually right before the spring thaw because our drains can't handle all of the melt all at once. And so to prevent flooding problems, they will then plow everything up and actually truck it out of town to dump in like a ditch out there or whatever. It makes driving kind of fun because they have to come along with a grader and scrape up all the ice. And the ice is often like 6 or more inches thick at this point. So it's a lot of ice they scrape up. And then like if you're trying to get to your driveway, there's a whole big ridge of ice, scraped up ice in the middle. So you sometimes have to come down the wrong way down your street to get into your driveway, or it can be frustrating, or go a really long way around and then drive all the way up the street to get to your place. Well, we'll see if they do it this year. We haven't had a lot of snow so far, but we will see. I find it kind of funny. I have family in BC, and they'll complain that, oh my gosh, it's been 3 days and our roads haven't been cleared. And I'm like, wow, we'll go months with our roads. Some years we don't get plowed at all. Ooh. Especially now that they closed down the school that was near my house. We used to get our street used to get plowed at some point, because even though we weren't directly on the school, buses did sometimes go through our street, so they had to keep that cleared. But they had to close that school down because it had like toxic mold in it, and so they haven't demolished the building, but it's no longer being used. I have seen some work crews there and like flags up and stuff for construction, so I'm not sure what they're planning, if they're trying to reclaim the building or what they're gonna do. But it's been a couple of years, so I guess we'll see. Ooh. strand too far down the line. Yeah, saying you have to be careful with translation because there have been people who have ended up with things tattooed on them that are not what they thought they said. There was one where somebody said they had what they thought was beautiful woman tattooed on them, and their friend who actually spoke the language was like, what do you think it says? They're like, beautiful woman. They're like, well, it's close. It says beautiful man. Oh. I mean, I don't know about the language because there's some languages that don't do pronouns in articles the same way. Hungarian's one of them. My husband's family's all fluent, and he said they just kind of will say the person's name. Jim went to the store, not he went to the store kind of thing. Or you'll just say went to the store, which was kind of confusing to me. And I'm friends with a couple of his relatives on Facebook, and they don't speak any English, so we have to rely on the Google translation, which is kind of automatic there, and usually can get it pretty close. So when my husband's mom passed away, I posted about how we would miss her, and her sister commented, she was the best sister, but it translated to he was the best brother because, like I said, they don't really, it's kind of genderless the way their articles and pronouns work. So the translation just reverts to male. But I mean, I knew what she meant, kind of thing. And there were a couple of times when I had to ask my husband what it was saying. And it can get confusing because they have formal versus informal. So it's the same language, but it's like the difference between English and like Shakespearean English. They may use the same words, but the structure and everything is very different, and it won't come naturally to you, kind of thing, to say it. Okay, bit of a fluffy here. There we go. Yeah, I said once in a previous video that the piece of Star Trek technology I want the most is a replicator, but a universal translator might be really nice too. Oops. Oh, yeah, that's a knot. Oh, sorry, guys. Oh. Alrighty. I'll stitch probably with this strand until it runs out. And like I said, I'll stitch up to where that intersects with the flower, but I don't think I'll stitch the flower yet. I will wait until I move the whole thing over and then do that. Let's split those strands there. Try to, there, I try to sort of go, no, that doesn't want to work, does it? It's still going between those. Try that one more time. Try to go sort of beside the strands that are there and not between them. I guess that's just determined to do that, so I doubt anybody would really notice but me. And especially not when it's done. Be looking at the whole thing at once. Oh, goodness, pardon me. I would have slept it a little later this morning, but my back was not feeling great. I think it might be more humid today. I noticed that when we went to visit family who is still in, pardon me, on Vancouver Island, my back gets much sorer because it is more humid. Kind of got used to it out here. On the prairies, it's drier, which means you have more static problems and your skin gets drier, but I do like I have a lot less joint pain. So it's kind of a trade-off. It was funny because that was a video. I was watching Speech Prof on Facebook. I follow him. And he voted one about, kids are brutal, man. And he said about how, I can't remember what it was he said they're talking about, but he said as a joke, oh, your mom fell in love with a handsome man. And his daughter looks right at him and says, really? Who was it? And I said, oh, kids keeping us humble since forever. And I said, there's one time my son and I were sitting on the couch and our upper arms touched. And he just says, Mom, your arm feels like bread dough. I'm like, okay, I'm really not sure how I'm supposed to take that. And he said, well, it's kind of cold and squishy. I'm like, well, thanks. And somebody said, I guess you need to moisturize. I said, oh, I do, but I live on the Canadian prairies. You are always playing catch up because it is so dry here. And I had some other people comment and said, oh yeah, my kid says one time was petting my arm and said, Mom, your skin. And I thought, oh, a compliment. And this says, it feels like a lizard. Like, thanks. So just doing that one there too. I am more than halfway to my 6,000 stitch estimate for the month, and I think I still have, it's either 4 or 5 sessions after this one. As I said, that shouldn't be an issue at all. I've had some bigger blocks here too of color. Yeah, not sure yet. The flower part may be a bit more detailed. Zoom out a bit here and take a look. there's lots of this navy blue around the flower. Now, it looks like not too confetti heavy, so I think my progress shouldn't be too bad through that part either, which is always nice. And it will be the flowers, and then there's mostly background and sort of the very last fringes of the peacock's tail, and then this whole piece will be done. Woohoo! Static, that piece of thread did not want to let go of me. I grew up on, like I said, Vancouver Island till I was like 15. So I would see ads they had for dealing with static and thought it was made up, because I thought I've never seen static that bad. But it turns out I just hadn't lived in a place where the air was dry enough to cause static that bad, because I have definitely experienced it since moving here. I often say I don't keep my hair very long anymore because I hate when it sticks to my neck. Stuff is very uncomfortable. And that happens a lot here if you take a sweater off or something. Yeah. Yeah, a lot more green here than you might think when looking at the whole picture. But I'll trust the pattern. It has been looking great so far. Yeah, there was kind of a surprise in, I was talking about at the end of last year about the Heaven and Earth Designs stitch along. I didn't join because none of the projects, pardon me, appealed to me. But they were having a bonus, so Amy Stewart did a exclusive pattern for just stitch along participants, and the whole idea was that you were supposed to stitch one page of whatever the stitch along piece was that you chose, and you would get this pattern. And then apparently they said they sent it out early in the year before anybody had completed anything. So there were people a little surprised about that, because it was supposed to be like a sort of accomplishment that they would have to stitch a page, and then they haven't. So, and apparently they said they used to release not the whole pattern at a time, but sort of a bit at a time. And apparently they released people's patterns, the whole thing, at the beginning of the year. So I'm not sure why they decided to do differently, but yeah, this is all secondhand. I'm getting my information because I didn't join. Every year I look, but there hasn't been any. There weren't any that appealed to me. But I know there are quite a few people who watch me who said they joined. There's a few companies that do stitch alongs, but like I said, so far they haven't. And the thing is, I'm kind of one of those, I've started a project, I want to finish it. And if I joined a stitch along, then I would sort of have to abandon what I'm working and switch to a new project. And I really don't want to do that right now. So, although I suppose this year wouldn't be as hard because I'm expecting to finish this one up before it's even half over. But as I said, none of the patterns were ones I felt I had to have. Amy Stewart's patterns are not really my style. I mean, I think they're beautiful and very detailed, but they're not really to my taste to stitch. So some of her patterns are so huge. over 1,000,000 stitches. Yeah. Which means I would have to go to a higher count because you wouldn't be able to get a piece of 14 count that big. Could you imagine? That would take up a whole wall in your house. Well, I have probably more patterns than I'll be able to complete in my lifetime anyway, so yeah. I'm not sure if I'm going to have anyone to inherit my my stash when I'm done, when I'm gone. No one else really does. There's my sister-in-law does it, but I mean, she's older than me, so. One of my friends, she tried to get a couple of her daughters interested, and they stitched for 3 or 4 days, and then they lost interest, so oh well. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna just check the length of this other one over here. Yeah, I had a feeling that wasn't very long. So I will add along a full length piece. If I manage to have 20,000 stitches left by the end of this month, then I would say 3 to 4 more months for it to be done. All right, I think I will work from this side out rather than the other side in. It was wild. I was looking at my Facebook memories, and last year it felt like minus 53 Celsius, and today, same day this year, is like plus 4. It was wild. You never really know. And there was one year it snowed May 29th, enough that my son made a snowman, and it melted by lunchtime, but I mean, still. There was enough snow that it fell and stuck. And that he was even able to make a snowman a couple of days before June. That was just nuts. Ugh. So I always say, you never can tell what the weather is going to be. As they say, you know, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes kind of thing. No, that doesn't look right. Yeah, I can see one of these strands is longer than the other. So I think something got pulled and they didn't line up quite right. That is one kind of drawback when you stitch with more than a single strand, is sometimes if they don't stay perfectly lined up, things can get wonky looking. Okay, I've passed 100 now, because I started at 45, so I've now done 100 on camera with you all. Goodness, you're just not wanting to cooperate today. No, okay. Fairly confetti heavy here. Slows things down a little bit. I did zero out a color yesterday. That was fun. Yeah. My favorite is right when you get to the end. And everything is zero. Somebody said they wish Pattern Keeper had a feature would give you fireworks or something across the screen. But Pattern Keeper is run by like a single person who does the coding, not a whole big corporation or anything. It may never leave. It's still called technically the beta phase, and it may never leave that, but I am happy with it. And like I say, I think it's really reasonably priced. It's a one-time purchase of about $10, $11. I would honestly happily pay a subscription fee even though I usually hate subscription services, but I would happily pay that because it is such a good little program. All right. Might have to kind of reset my strands here. Yeah, okay. Drop my needle. Oh, where did you go? Darn it. I don't want to stab myself with it. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide these threads, these strands here, put them on separate sort of holders here. Just kind of move them out of the way, and then I won't have an issue. All right, back to where I was. Find that one that was on my chair before it pokes me in the behind. All right, so I said these ones that belong to the flower here, I'm not going to stitch with them yet. So I'm going to also separate those out. There, now I sort of have fewer threads in one area, so that will help keep it from tangling up. Say that, but then of course now sometimes I will sort of do a few stitches into the next motif where they kind of intersect. So this is probably technically part of the petal, but I'll do it. Maybe not. It's hard to tell sort of exactly where that line is because they tend to kind of blend in together. So sort of around this grid line is where I'm going to kind of cut it off, fill in everything up to there, and then move it over again. Actually, now that I look at it, I think the petal kind of goes in and then will come out again. Obviously, it doesn't make a straight line. Oh, I think I have another. Oh, I parked a strand wrong. That's what happened. Yeah. Going, there is a strand parked here, and it shouldn't be. And I know what that is. That's 327. That's this color here. I went to the wrong side of the brown one that was parked there. That's what I did. Yeah. This one goes here. Okay, that's what I did. So I rarely park wrong, but I can usually figure out where I went wrong when I do. Worst case scenario, if I can't figure out where the incorrectly parked strand is supposed to go, I will just pull it to the back and tie it off and sort of start afresh. But I've only ever had to do that 2 or 3 times. It's very rare. Two. Check this other strand up here. That's not very long either, so. Oops, try that again. So I said stopping at that line, but honestly, because of the way the colors go, to me it made more sense to just sort of keep going for a bit and then sort of slant back, following that slope, kind of the way it's going. So my method of stitching, I don't stick to sharp stops and starts. I kind of let it grow a little more organically. But always, of course, stitching connected to current stitches and not leaving gaps or closing in is my big guidelines. I'm gonna have to get up and walk around soon because one of my feet has gone numb. Need to move around and get some circulation going again. Yeah, I have lousy circulation. Always have. Actually, one thing that's been kind of nice is I used to take a magnesium supplement at night to help me sleep, magnesium glycinate, but it was upsetting my stomach. And so I switched to a magnesium cream, which I put on my feet, and I found that my feet have not been so cold. So that's been kind of nice. I don't know whether it's just sort of an illusion that it feels warmer or it actually increases circulation, but I'll take it. I have had cold feet my whole life, and it has sucked. The only time I didn't was when I was pregnant, and for a year afterwards. That was so nice. My hands get cold too, but not as bad as my feet. My feet were always blocks of ice, and so I said, I'm always cold, so a lot of women complain about being too hot. And for me, actually, it was just perfect. All through winter and the following spring, I was nice and warm. I was the perfect temperature. I wouldn't have minded that effect lasting. But I have not had to use my hot water bottle in a while, because a lot of times, winter nights, that's part of my routine, is have have one at my feet because they're ice cold and I cannot sleep when my feet are icy. I was able to find an unscented one because most scented stuff, it makes me nauseated or gives me a headache. I don't know why my mother-in-law was always giving me scented lotions and I couldn't use them. I don't know why it was so important to her that I have a scented one, because I said I don't mind using unscented. And like I said, I have specific brands that I like. You don't need to keep buying me new stuff, because there's a lot of them I don't like if they're waxy. I hate wax in stuff. I find it doesn't actually absorb into the skin, and so it doesn't actually moisturize properly. So I hate that, and I don't like anything, like I said, with a really strong smell. Even the smell people think is mild to me is strong, so... I have very acute hearing and a very acute sense of smell. My mother-in-law was, for a while, she was making lotions and soaps and stuff. And she always wanted to bring me stuff. And I said, like, I really appreciate you thinking of me, but I mean, I don't want you to waste your hard work because I can't use anything that smells too strong. And she'd always bring it anyway. So I often ended up giving it to friends. So at least somebody got some use out of it. But she would say, well, this one doesn't smell very strong. And I'm thinking, well, maybe to you, but to me, I can smell it across the room. This will take me to over 200. I did, like I say, start at 45 today, but I still think that's a pretty good number. I think those fuzzies go to the back again. There, that's better. This will take me to past 200, so. There's another fuzzy coming up. There, so 205. So I thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you here next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.